This year marks the 23rd anniversary of the twin terrorist attacks at the US Embassies in Tanzania's commercial capital of Dar es Salaam and the Kenyan capital Nairobi. That saw 224 people lose their lives. In the years following the attack, Tanzania has had to pay closer attention to terrorism as the country grapples with growing terrorist threats locally. When I joined by our correspondent Isaac Lukando, who was in the vicinity during those attacks in Dar es Salaam. A very good afternoon to you, Isaac. Thanks indeed for joining us. I do understand that you were quite close to the embassy at the time that those attacks did happen. So, you know, taking off your reporter hat just on a personal level, if you can take us back to that, and certainly what became a precursor to the attack then in the US.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yes, indeed, on that particular day at around 10:30 a.m., I was about 3.5 kilometers from the blast, about 9 minutes away, and the building that we were in experienced quite the tremor. Just to give you a picture of the size of the bombs that went off, we were told later that they were about 2.7 tons all the way to 15.4 metric tons of explosives that went off here in Dar es Salaam and in Nairobi simultaneously, almost simultaneously. And so that began, I believe, the overt journey of Tanzania combating terrorism. I think that most of the people at the time in the country, the mood in the country at the time was that this was an isolated event, and it had more to do with American foreign policy than anything homegrown, although we did become aware that a Tanzanian was involved among the 4 suspects that were involved in the incident, who were later in 2001 convicted just before the September 11th attack. So there was a Tanzanian there who's now serving a life sentence, convicted of taking part in those terrorist attacks that led to the loss of many lives, although here in Tanzania only 11 lost their lives. Now, fast forward these many years later, just late last month in August, you have Hamza Mohammed, a gunman whom the police have since described as a terrorist, came to the very spot where the terrorist attacks took place in 1998. You have the French embassy there and the US embassy on the opposite side, or what used to be the US embassy on the side. The exact same spot is where this 29-year-old man came out and shot at police. He killed 3 policemen and a guard there. So 4 people lost their lives just last month in what the police are describing as a terrorist attack. So you see, over the years, this has become now a reality that Tanzanians have to deal with.
Yeah, we're just listening to a report indeed from Kenya, and part of the conversation was around the fact that, you know, you have terror groups like Al-Shabaab who are pledging allegiance to the bigger groups like Al-Qaeda. And of course, then we look at the Taliban, for example. It might be a similar situation too. And one then wonders, you know, how is Tanzania then tackling the issue of terror attacks currently? Is it a case of being sitting ducks and kind of just waiting as and when these terror groups decide to attack next?
What we know from authorities here, particularly recent statements from the Inspector General of Police, is that the government is now actively trying to persuade family units, for example, here in Tanzania, to be more vigilant, to look out for terrorist ideals among the youth, because taking the example of Hamza Mohammed, who was killed as he tried to execute a terrorist attack, He was considered a very normal, peace-loving citizen. Those in his neighborhood spoke very well of him. And so the government is now deciding to be more proactive, more vigilant in how they deal with terrorism. So far, the government has been somewhat successful in dealing with terrorist incidents. In the last decade, there have been 4 particular incidents that have stuck out. There was a particular incident in 2013, in November, where the government was able to capture 69 individuals who were running an indoctrination camp where they had like 50 children between the ages of 4 and 13. And they were being indoctrinated in matters of terrorism, and even were given military training. So the government has been trying to be more proactive, but I think over the years it has also discovered the scale of the problem, where in the past you'd see that it was only Tanzanians leaving the country, taking part in terrorist activity abroad. But now it has become a question of now being vigilant about what's happening at home.
Yeah. The other question that's often dodged is the issue of or the fact that these terror organizations are certainly well funded, and they cannot operate without being as well funded as they are. And one wonders, when you're talking about governments, not just the government in Tanzania, but globally, governments trying to proactively deal with the issue of terror organizations, when they're asked the questions why we're not going to the root of the issue as to who funds these organizations, and in terms of following the money and seeing where the root problem actually is.
That's a very important question that you pose here, and I think it is one that authorities have to ask themselves, who have not been given direct information about who is funding these individuals who come out. So far, it has been largely individuals who come out and do what has to date been described as isolated events. But then you have attacks, for example, in 2020, in October 2020, where you have militants, 305 militants coming over from the Mozambican border into southern Tanzania. And, burning houses, killing at least 20 people. So you see that there is an importance of finding the source of the money, and up to this moment we do not have that information about who is funding them, who is taking them for training outside the country, whether it's outside the country or inside the country. And that is something I think that authorities will come and look at more aggressively.
All right, Isaac Lukando, thank you very much for that input, and certainly giving us an update onto the situation in Tanzania, and the link certainly between the US and Tanzania during that time. Thanks a lot.